Hi, thanks for watching. Okay, so in this video, I'd like to talk a little bit more about this stuff about Hilaria Baldwin and Rachel Dolezal and Buffy St. Marie and this whole controversy about, stealing identities and having identity issues and maybe having even personality or subclinical personality disorders, maybe, serious identity issues where you have such an unstable identity that you end up acquiring some outlandish, unrealistic identity as though it were really you. And the question of whether this is more of a fraud or if it's more of an eccentricity. Okay. And I think it really depends on how we want to look at this. Okay. I'm the first to admit that when I look at both Hilaria Baldwin and Rachel Dolezal, I do see some subclinical cluster B issues. I do see some serious identity issues, okay, where these people have very unstable, problematic identities. And I'm sure that if we really explored a lot of people who are, let's say, in the trans community or people who have, major, gender dysphorias or whatever, we would probably see that a lot of people in the world have some issues with their identity and are, let's say, susceptible to maybe a very radical acquisition of a foreign identity or something. And it is unfortunate, but I hesitate to see all of this as just absolutely toxic or absolutely bad or absolutely, just dangerous. I think it's in a spectrum, and I want to be careful to sort of remind ourselves, just to remind ourselves that, I personally believe that ever since the 1970s, okay, I think when we got into the 1980s, I think we lost one vitamin, one very important vitamin that I think, somehow when Reagan came in and after the Iran hostage crisis, I think there was one vitamin that I think died from the 70s. And that was the vitamin that I saw, at least in the disco movement, and you can criticize the disco movement. It has its good things, its authentic things, and its bullshit. But one of the things I liked about the disco movement was the embrace of something that I think came out of the drag culture, from the world of the gay culture, the drag culture, which is this kind of the joy of outrageous, outlandish, ridiculous, how would you say, like flamboyance. Okay, so flamboyance, I think flamboyance is one of those rare, very, very subtle aspects of human light, human joy. Okay, and I think that I wonder if maybe we sort of happened on flamboyance, like, the kind of flamboyance that came out of the late 60s and then eventually in the 1970s, especially with like, say, the gay drag culture, just outrageous flamboyance. Okay, I wonder if maybe we underestimate how valuable that was. Okay, and what a special vitamin it is to bring this sort of like outrageous, absurd, ridiculous flamboyance and sort of embrace it as one of the vitamins of our human joy, of human light. Okay. And, I think we may underestimate how valuable it is, just the outlandish, absurd, ridiculous flamboyance, of, like, say, some of what we saw in the disco culture of the 1970s. I think we may really underestimate how valuable it is to have as much ridiculousness and absurdness sort of integrated into our hearts and souls. We may really underestimate the importance of being silly to the point of being outrageous. Okay, outrageous. And I think we just don't. I don't think we fully appreciate how important the outrageous is, the wildly eccentric, off planet, out of sight, just outlandish. I think we really underestimate how valuable that dimension is. Okay, the dimension of not the absurd, but the ridiculous. Just off the charts. I think we really underestimate how important that vitamin is, of that crazy flamboyance. How important that vitamin is to our overall sanity. Okay, I think it gives us a lot of good spirits. Okay, and I think it brings us down to earth, and at the same time, it takes us outside of, like, say, our normal box, you know. And I think it does allow us to be much more open-minded without having to talk about being open-minded. And so I really think there was something in the 70s I think just by accident, the disco culture just kind of combined a lot of aspects of, like, say, the drag culture, the drag culture from the gay community, or the gay, I don't know, the gay world, the gay culture. But there was something kind of outrageous about drag and how they embraced extremely outrageous flamboyance. Okay. And so I think that when I take those spirits in, because I didn't want to say goodbye to the 70s. I enjoyed growing up in the 70s. And in a sense, I sort of retained, I think, a kind of affinity for the outrageousness of the disco culture, and how important it is, I think, to sort of embrace outrageousness, ridiculousness. Okay. And in a way, it sort of takes us out of sort of the rigidity of our, I don't know, I think as humans, we tend to be very rigid. I think we tend to be more rigid than we think. And I think we tend to very easily kind of be very harsh with people who are very outside the boundaries of what we consider to be reasonable or acceptable. Okay. So I really think, for me, it's very important to maintain sort of a love affair, with the outrageous and the ridiculous. Okay. And really embrace it. Um, and I think that's such an important vitamin for our creativity, for our full spectrum of human light. I don't think we have full light in our hearts if we don't have a good relationship with the ridiculous. That's a very important aspect. And I think those of us who think we have the light of truth and think we have a good relationship with the light of truth, I think we all need to ask ourselves, how is our relationship with the ridiculous? Are we maybe not getting enough of it? And are we vitamin deficient? And I worry about that, because when I look at people like Hilaria Baldwin and Rachel Dolezal, okay, I, like everybody else, I can see the dark side. Okay, I can see the bullshit. Okay, there is an aspect of bullshit. Okay, and I think in both Rachel Dolezal and Hilaria Baldwin, I do see an element of the pathological liar. Okay, I can see that, right? But the problem is, if I don't counterbalance that with some appreciation for the importance of wild eccentricity, okay, and to have color in the spectrum, of the flowers and the feathers of life. If we don't have enough openness to all the full range of craziness in the world, what I'm afraid of is that I think we're going to maybe underestimate the value of eccentric color, of the eccentric color of very strange and weird people. Okay. And we're going to overly focus on that little aspect of the pathological liar and the bullshit in these people. Because there is an aspect of bullshit, in these people. And, pathological lying is a problem. But if we get so how would you say, if we become like so obsessed with like discovering the slightest element of dishonesty in people. Oh my God, I think I caught a dishonesty. I think I found somebody who's being a little bit psychopathic. Oh wow. If we get so like caught up in this like obsession with psychopathy and sociopathy, where we're trying to detect like the slightest dishonesties in people, the slightest bullshit, the slightest inauthenticity, and we almost become like obsessed with trying to identify sociopathy and identify personality disorders, I think we're going to pay a big price, because I think we're going to close the door, and we're going to close the aperture to allow all these vitamins to come in, all these other positive vitamins to come into us, in terms of opening ourselves to like embracing eccentricity, or at least being, let's say, allowing ourselves to find it amusing that people can be very eccentric and weird, and even a little bit pathological in terms of, lying or having just weird stuff in their personality. And I think we're going to start to like reduce our vitamin intake, of appreciation, as far as like people who are like, say, kind of off the charts, and not everybody who's off the charts is dangerous, and I just don't want to see us get to that point where we get so paranoid that we're going to think that just because somebody's a little bit of a pathological liar, or they got some weird eccentricities or some weird issues in a kaleidoscope, like a kaleidoscope fragmented identity crisis, where they have no stable identity, and when we find those people, we're just going to immediately want to see them as like really bad people, or just immediately think they're a sociopath. And I think we're going to lose, I think, in the process, we're going to kind of like filter out a whole spectrum of light that is important for our vitamin nutrition, to not have vitamin deficient souls, So I think, at least for my soul, whatever little soul I have, I think it's important to never lose touch with the joy and the color of not just the absurd, but also the ridiculous. Okay. And I think in some ways, people who are truly ridiculous, they don't even know they're ridiculous. Okay. They don't even realize it. Some people are just out of sight, crazy, ridiculous, and they've just got weird feathers and plumage and bizarre combinations of pathological lying, weird identity stuff. And these are the people who, in some ways, they may have like a dark side on the inside. That's true. There may be some darkness there. There may be some pathology there, but they also have a tremendous gift of presenting us with weird, like, feathers and plumage and color and absurdness and ridiculousness that I think helps us have more light in our lives. And I think if we can see the funniness of it, if we can learn to laugh at it and just see how crazy it is in a funny way and even enjoy it, I think we can at the same time see that there are maybe problems with these people where they have, like, say, identity issues, where they have maybe even, like, like a fragmented identity and maybe even a little bit of pathology. But at the same time, there's something kind of funny about people who are just, like, not just crazy, but ridiculous. Okay. So in the case of Hilaria Baldwin, I mean, it is funny because, I mean, she is a little bit of a pathological liar. She was probably in her late 20s when she became, like, say, like, really exposed to and really, like, enamored with, let's say, the Spanish culture, and let's say the beauty of the Spanish language as spoken by European Spanish people. They have a lot of wit, a lot of style, a lot of sophistication in their language. And I think Hilaria just fell so much in love that, with her already fragmented and unstable personality issues and her unstable identity, she just acquired this whole, like, fantasy. Hilaria Baldwin acquired, like, this fantasy of a long-standing Spanish heritage. Okay. And what's so funny about it is that if you go to Spain, you'll notice that some people look kind of dark skinned and they have classic, like, dark hair. But a lot of Spanish people have blonde hair, and a lot of Spanish people actually look more white than Hilaria Baldwin. I've seen pictures of Hilaria Baldwin when she was, like, in high school, and for a white girl, she had brown eyes and kind of brown hair, and she had kind of a very kind of a not kind of a dark she was kind of a dark complected white person. Okay. And there are Spanish people who have lighter skin, who have blonder hair, who have blue eyes, who look whiter than Hilaria Baldwin. So it's kind of interesting that if you really want to acquire, like, say, a Spanish identity, if you want to play that game, okay, you could be blonde haired and blue eyed, and you could imitate a blonde haired Spanish person, who looks whiter than most Americans, if you wanted to. But she chose almost like this stereotype of how we imagine Spanish people, not how Spanish people actually are. Okay, if you go to Spain, you're not going to find people who look exactly like Hilaria Baldwin. You're going to find a lot of people who look maybe whiter than Hilaria Baldwin, or maybe who look maybe a darker, but there's a whole spectrum of people. So she had to choose this almost like weird, like, stereotype of the Spanish, like a Spanish person. Like, she took on, like, this image. Okay. And I think she did that in part because I think, as a white person, I don't think she felt that white. Okay. I don't think she had the blondest hair. I don't think she was as hot as white people can be. Okay. I think she was kind of average in her looks. I think she felt maybe that she didn't have, like, a terribly beautiful white appearance. And so I think she feels like if she could sort of adopt, like, a more darker, more gypsy looking, kind of like a darker looking, persona, I think she feels like in that level, she'll be like a higher standing somehow. That there she'll be, it's like, in a weird way, she thinks she'll be hotter. She'll be hotter as a dark Latina, and that's the acquisition. That's the image that she's acquired so that she can have, like, higher status, basically. But deep down inside, that's so instinctual. She probably suffered maybe not liking her image as a young person, and maybe the same place in her that gave her the eating disorder that she had, because she suffered with bulimia and eating issues. That same identity disturbance probably allowed her to have that almost like unconscious acquisition of, like, this almost like stereotyped, like, dark skinned, Spanish person with a completely, like, her, well, the way she takes on the Spanish accent, I mean, I can tell you because I'm fluent in Spanish, and my mother is Colombian, and I am actually a mixed race person, and I am half Latino, so because I'm very fluent in Spanish, and I feel very comfortable in the Spanish culture. For me to see Hilaria like taking on this whole like pretending to have a Spanish accent, I can tell you that she does not come across as having actual fluency in Spanish. And I've seen her interviewed in Spanish, and her Spanish is very, very basic. She has a very basic Spanish. So what she's doing, she's not really using like a real knowledge of Spanish. I mean, she has basic Spanish, but what she's doing is it's an impersonation. Okay. It's like an impression. It's like when an actor does an impression of a foreign person. So nobody in Spain is going to think she's Spanish. They might for 1 second, but then after watching her, they'll be like, "That's a crazy American." It's like, what, she just looks crazy. So I don't know. I realize that she has, some pathology. I realize there is a sickness. I realize that the children, that Hilaria's children, are going to have real issues. They may have to be deprogrammed because she's imposing this major, like fake identity, this whole fake cultural identity on the family, which is really overpowering and probably doesn't leave a lot of room for the children to develop their own identities. So I realize there's problems there. But I also think that leaving aside all the obvious pathologies and all the obvious issues with her personality, I think Hilaria may have some other good qualities. I'm sorry to say it. You guys are going to think I'm crazy, but she may not be a terrible, terrible mother. She may have issues. She may be way over dominating in terms of not letting her children have their own identity, because that's the problem with cluster B and narcissistic people. They have such a pathological sense of identity that they almost don't allow other people to have an identity, and everybody has to like live in a fantasy. So I realize that's a problem, but I think she does love her kids, and I think her kids are going to have to go through some kind of deprogramming. But I think in the end, I think it's possible for creative children to, like, say, discover that maybe, hey, my mother is crazy, she's maybe a whack job, but that doesn't mean she's bad, and that doesn't mean she, is just nothing but evil or whatever. And I think people can be a little more flexible. We don't have to have perfect people. People can have weird shit, and even be a little bit crazy. And I think if we can all lighten up, and just kind of like forgive people for like not being perfect and having maybe some bullshit, crazy stuff in them, and I think one of the ways we can learn to get over this stuff and maybe to be more at peace, maybe with people not being perfect, is maybe to sort of embrace the imperfection, okay? And to embrace the fact that people are, in a sense, kind of absurd and even ridiculous, And if you can sort of see someone like Hilaria Baldwin as kind of in her own unconscious way, she is a little bit dark and pathological, but she's also ridiculous. And if you can sort of embrace the ridiculous, you can almost like find a way to have like to be, you can almost find a way for her to be endearing in a way. You know what I mean? Like, not too much, but I can almost find a way to almost have sympathy with Hilaria Baldwin. If I can just add that vitamin to my light of just kind of having more appreciation for things that are both absurd and ridiculous. Okay. And because she is in that ridiculous place, and because I don't think she has full control of it, I think it's almost an embarrassing truth, with her. I think I can find in myself like a little more sympathy, not to say that the kids won't have problems, but in the world, I'm sorry, if you really want to do a survey, I think a lot of people have parents that have kind of fucked up shit. Okay. If you really want to do percentages, don't tell me that the United States is 80% perfectly healthy and only 20% crazy. I think it's more like 20% healthy and probably 80% crazy. And a lot of people grow up with parents who aren't, like, say, they may not be full-blown narcissists or full-blown histrionic, but they got bullshit and they got toxic things. And all of us, a lot of us, maybe 80% or more of us, grow up with some weird crap in our family that, we're going to have to get over. And I think as we're, like, say, as we get into like, say, high school or being like adolescents or going to college, I think all of us should probably deprogram from our families, regardless of how toxic they are. I think probably a lot of people are maybe too much influenced by their parents, and that's just an unfortunate byproduct of having parents. But I think that probably all of us, regardless of whether our parents are as crazy as Hilaria Baldwin, but I think all of us as we, approach adolescence and college and, kind of growing up, I think all of us should try to deprogram from our origins and maybe try to strike out our own independent identity. I think probably all of us are maybe too influenced by our upbringing, and also for us not to be victims of our upbringing. So I mean, while I do kind of have a little bit of concern for Hilaria Baldwin's children, I also think that, as a culture, I think we can all maybe embrace more, um, the fact that some people are eccentric, and that not every case of pathological lying, or not every case of somebody who's a little bit fraudulent, a little bit bullshitty, not all of that has to be taken as just pure toxicity. I think on some level it is, in a way, it's also eccentricity, and we can just appreciate it as just being kind of like, absurd and ridiculous, and maybe have more of a sense of humor about it. So I'm one of those people where I really think that, we lost a very important vitamin of light in the 1970s. I think we really lost our sense of the flamboyant. Okay, and we want to be really careful not to lose that, because I think even in indigenous people. Okay, and I have a picture of an indigenous African person, I think from, I can't remember the name of the country. It's the country that used to be a German occupied. It's I think it's Namibia. Namibia. It's in southern Africa, but it's a picture of a native person, shopping in a modern drugstore or shopping center, and I just think that to me captures a little bit the joy of the ridiculous. Okay, the ridiculous to me is when you have things that are so incompatible that when you put them together, it just makes you laugh. Because it's just like you're bringing in elements that have nothing to do with each other. It's beyond absurd. You know what I mean? The absurd is when things are just incompatible, but when things are grossly incompatible, it's just like it brings out laughter, because it's just, there's something in us, like an instinct, that when we see things that are just grossly incompatible, just off the charts, just not even absurd, but just ridiculous, it almost brings out a kind of a joy, you know and I think there's something very beautiful about that. And I think maybe there's something even in indigenous African cultures that maybe we overlook as Westerners looking at Africans, where we want to impose on them this idea that they're just these very naive, native people. But we fail to see how maybe they are very rich in outrageousness, outrageous flamboyance. And so it's not only the gay culture, that brought to us the flamboyance of drag, but I think maybe there's even an African influence that maybe helped us develop in the 1970s. Okay, a more healthy and richer sense of the ridiculous as an element of the flamboyance of the soul. And so I really think that's a real gift that we can see in a lot of even native people. But all I can say is that, occasionally when you run into somebody as crazy off the charts as Hilaria Baldwin or Rachel Dolezal, I think, we can at the same time see, that there is some pathology, that there is some fucked up shit, there is some dishonesty, but at the same time, there is something also kind of funny, and kind of endearing about people who are so off the charts that they're beyond absurd, and you cross that line into the ridiculous. And it is just it just makes you want to laugh, and I think it is kind of funny. And I think we shouldn't deprive ourselves of the capacity to appreciate and have that dimension of joy in our lives. And if I were to say it, I think we were very lucky in the 1970s to have that weird cocktail that developed through maybe African and gay influences, where we developed this amazing drag culture and this amazing sense of like off the charts flamboyance. Okay, and I really think that if we could sort of maybe reacquire an appreciation for the importance of flamboyance and the importance of not just the absurd but also the ridiculous, if we could really open ourselves to that, I think we'll open ourselves to more vitamins of light and a broader light spectrum into our hearts, and we'll be less vitamin deprived that way. And I think it'll be better for us, and I think we'll better be able to handle cases where you have somebody who may just be a pathological liar, or cases of people like Rachel Dolezal, where I think maybe Rachel Dolezal, I think she wanted to do good in the world, and I think she wanted to honestly sort of identify with Black culture. But I think maybe even Rachel Dolezal doesn't appreciate that maybe she had her own identity disturbance, and maybe her acquisition of the Black identity maybe was a little more pathological than she thought, And maybe like Hilaria Baldwin, maybe Rachel Dolezal also has some maybe deep kind of unstable identity issues, And so we can at the same time appreciate that there is some bullshit, there is some toxicity, there is some level of maybe a subclinical, personality issue with these people. But at the same time, there is something also beautiful, even if it is fucked up. There is something beautiful about people who are just like outrageous and ridiculous, and just, I think it will even improve our sense of humor, um, and I think, there's a lot to see in the world, and I just don't want to see a world where we see less and less flowers. Okay. And I think people like this, people like Rachel Dolezal, people like Hilaria, there is an aspect of them being a little bit sick or a little bit messed up, but they are also the rare flowers of the world. They do constitute the panorama of the flowers of our human experience. And I don't think we want, in the spirit of, like, say, trying to be like healthy, and in the spirit of mental health, I don't think we want to end up like trimming more flowers than we want to, because we may end up, in the spirit of being perfectly honest and perfectly healthy, we may end up with a world without as many flowers. And I personally would like to see the hummingbirds and the flowers and the crazy, and just the outrageous. I want to see not just the hummingbirds, but I want to see hummingbirds with big sunglasses. It's like, that's the kind of imagination that comes from the absurd and the ridiculous. And I think, sadly, we lost that in the 1970s. Somehow we reached a point where we wanted to kill disco. And by killing disco, we accidentally killed one of the few areas where we actually had very vibrant, ridiculous flamboyance. Okay. And we really lost that. And that I think, it's hard to get those things back. And I just think people should at least try to open their minds to the importance and the beauty and the richness of sort of embracing the wildly eccentric, things that are so eccentric that it sort of crosses that borderline into the ridiculous. And that we don't, in the spirit of, like, say, mental health, want to end up becoming so serious and so rigid that we end up killing all those flowers. So, I can see it on the one hand that both Rachel Dolezal and Hilaria Baldwin, that there is a pathological element, but there's still a part of me that can appreciate sort of how funny they are, and how funny it is to see people who are actually ridiculous. And it's not like I'm making fun of them, and I'm not making a fool of them. I'm saying there's a part of me that can appreciate them. Okay. And I even feel like sympathy for them. And I feel like united to them as fellow human, that they're reminding me of the ridiculousness that maybe I don't have enough of. You know what I mean? So it's not like I laugh at them, but they bring out a laughter in me, because now we're sharing sort of in a broader sense of human light, to include the ridiculous. So it's actually a gift. And I think sometimes, just like some geniuses can have terrible, terrible personal problems, like, say, remember Michael Jackson, remember Prince. How many times have we had a great artist who deep inside has demons, but they still bring us the gifts of their genius. Likewise, Hilaria Baldwin and Rachel Dolezal, they may have some messed up stuff on the inside, but they are bringing to us by accident, a gift of genius, in the sense of the genius of the ridiculous. And I think we want to be careful not to underestimate that, and not to accidentally kill that in the spirit of so-called mental health, because maybe in the end, if we try to be too mentally healthy, we may end up not being very healthy. So anyway, that's just my reflections on Rachel Dolezal and Hilaria Baldwin, and how I think it's so important that we never let go of our relationship with the flamboyant, the full ridiculous flamboyant of the flamboyant spectrum of human light. Anyway, appreciate that, and thanks for watching.